the Young Dudes by MsKingBean89, Chapter 106, 6th Year, The Long Night. She was not what he had expected. Well, he had not known what to expect, but it was certainly not this. She was small-bodied, but had the bearing of someone much taller. Her sharp, angular features were made more severe by her shaved head and huge, full grey eyes, which focused on him with a predator's glint. She had a wide mouth, and her lip had been split at some point, and healed badly. She had scars too, as many as he did, but almost invisible under a complex lacework of small circular tattoos, spiralling across her weather-beaten skin in untraceable sequences. "Remus Lupin," she said, in a low, gravelly voice. She had a horrible, menacing smile. She showed all of her teeth, which were in bad condition, discoloured and uneven. "I've been waiting for you, my dear." He pulled out his wand at once, adopting a duelling stance. "Drop that," she snarled, raising a hand. Her nails were long, yellow and clawed, filthy with dirt. His wand clattered to the ground, and he gasped. Remus was frozen to the spot. She stood only meters away, and his wand was within reach, but he couldn't move a muscle. She laughed, her breath stark and white in the winter air. "I saw you here on Christmas Eve," she said. She pointed to the dark alley. "I saw you there, with the human. I followed you both." "What do you want?" he asked, steadily, staring her down. She was repulsive, unclean. Her cloak was a heavy matted animal fur, crawling with lice and other vermin. She stank of the forest and rotten blood. Despite this, something drew him in, something familiar, safe and welcoming. "Pack," the wolf told him, a low growl from somewhere inside. "Pack." "We want you, brother," she said, stepping forward. She lowered her hand, and he felt a sort of unclicking in his muscles and stepped back automatically. "We?" he asked, finding courage now that he could move again. He snatched up his wand, and she allowed it. "We, us," she said, stepping forward again. She walked with one foot in front of the other, like an animal. Her feet were bare on the cobbles, black with filth. "Who's us?" he asked, glancing back quickly. He was almost at the door. If he backed away far enough, he'd be visible from the inside of the pub windows. "Your family, Remus Lupin." "Oh, right," he asked, still distracted by his progress towards the pub. He had to get closer to people. "Well," he tried smiling, "if we're family, I'd better buy you a drink." "You reek of human terror, Remus Lupin," she said, tilting her head to one side. "Sorry," he said, with a shrug. "Do you want a drink or not?" "If it pleases you." "Great." He pushed open the door with some relief and stepped into the grimy pub. He had never really felt safe in the Og's Head, but he had never been quite so glad to be surrounded by the other wizards, dark or not. There were maybe 5 or 6 of them, including the old white-bearded barman. A few patrons glanced up from under their hoods as the 2 werewolves entered, but if they had any clue about the situation, they made no sign of it. She sat at a table, not taking her eyes off Remus for a moment. He didn't order drinks, just sat opposite her. He placed both his hands on the table, feeling that this was the safest option, hoping that she would see he was not planning to attack. "So, you know my name. What's yours?" He didn't know where this cavalier attitude had come from, whether it was a momentary madness or just the outcome of his own stupidity, but it was keeping him safe for now. "Livia." "Livia." "We do not need other names. We belong to the pack." "Right, okay. So, you were sent by the pack?" "I was sent by my father." "Greyback." She did not reply. She just kept staring at him with her strange, violent eyes. She did not belong indoors, he felt. The train of her cloak was caked in mud, and dirt smeared the parts of her skin that were visible. Up close, he could see now that her tattoos were not simply circles, they were moon phases. "Is Greyback really your father?" Remus asked, keeping his voice low. "He is our father," she said. "Order or leave," the tall, ancient barman appeared by their side. Remus looked up at him, wishing he knew how to transmit thoughts. Butterbeer, please." Livia did not say anything, and the barman did not question her, only snapped his fingers and the bottle appeared. He shuffled away, back behind his bar. Remus wiped the rim of the bottle cautiously and took a sip. It was much too sickly and not cold enough. "Okay," he said, to Livia again. "You're on Greyback's pack. That, must be nice. Do you—" "I called for you, Remus Lupin," Livia interrupted, settling back in her chair. Remus was convinced that he had not yet seen her blink. "I heard you calling for me. You sang so beautifully." "You mean on the moon?" "I waited as long as I could, but the hunt was too good, and I was hungry." Her eyes gleamed brightly, as if the memory was still very fresh. "Why didn't you come to me? They did not lock you up. I followed you scent for days afterwards." "I'm not a killer," he said. "I don't hunt." She laughed. "Madness! What have they done to you, my poor brother? Father told me you had suffered at the humans' hands, but I did not know how much." "I don't suffer," Remus replied indignantly. "I've been lucky. They take care of me." "Poor boy," she said sadly. "You do not know. But of course that is not your fault. How could they see anything but the shadows if they were never allowed to move their heads?" "Plato," Remus sat up, curious. "Greyback lets you study Muggle philosophy?" "My father places no limitations on me. My father wishes me to be free and strong and wise. And a murderer. Wolves cannot murder. You know this, Remus Lupin." "But we aren't wolves, are we?" he whispered. "Not all the time." "We are what we are," she replied. She was enjoying this. He could tell. "You wear that uniform and wave your silly stick, but you know you have more in common with me than anyone in that castle." She licked her lips. "I have come to bring you home, Remus Lupin." "Why now?" "The time is right," she cocked her head. "Father prefers to wait until we are of age, so that we come to him with a true understanding of our place in the world. The place the human filth have forced on us. But time is short for us all these days." "I'm not going with you," he said. "I belong here. I'm a wizard." She laughed again, a throaty, deep laugh that rattled in her chest and spoke of long, cold winters in hard, unforgiving environments. "A wizard," she spat, ruefully. "To think that a magnificent beast like you would aspire to be such a creature! You don't know half the power you hold, Remus Lupin. Nor does Dumbledore. I'm still not going anywhere. Father suspected you would be difficult. He is very eager to meet you." That sent a chill down Remus's spine. She smiled again, reading him like a book. Remus swallowed dryly, ignoring the butterbeer now. "I'd like to meet him," he replied, stiffly. "In time," she nodded, "once you have come to understand your place." "What's he like?" Remus barely breathed the question. Livia's eyes shone, and he had the impression that she could not see him. She was imagining something wonderful. "He is magnificent." "Do you think that—" Remus could hardly keep the emotion from his voice. "You call him your father, after what he did to you?" "He elevated me," she hissed, her eyes focusing again, eyebrows knitting in a frown. "He gave me the greatest gift, and he gave it to you, Remus Lupin. Your father is calling you home." "And that's what you're here for, is it?" He looked her up and down. She gave a small shrug. "My father had hoped that I might be the right one to persuade you. I learnt on Christmas Eve that he was mistaken. We did not know that your desires lay elsewhere." She licked her lips again, her eyes raking over him. "This will not be a problem. I should let you know. The pack does not discriminate. You will find someone to your taste." "I'm not going anywhere," he repeated. "You can tell him that. And I want you gone before the next moon." "Don't flatter yourself, my dear brother," she arched an eyebrow. "I am here at my father's request. I came to speak with you, and nothing more." "You murdered a woman!" Wolves cannot murder Remus Lupin. I waited for you. When you did not come, I followed my nature. It is not easy, I know. Learning that the world is not as it seems is very painful, but you will learn, and you will come to us." She tapped out a rhythm on the beer-soaked table with her disgusting fingernails, and once again Remus found himself frozen in place. She smiled and ran a blackened talon across his arm, slowly. It was hideous, vile, revolting, raising goosebumps in his flesh, but he couldn't get away. "They will trap you like this," she whispered. "They will cage you, shackle you, and tie you down until you are half mad with hunger. You will be beaten and betrayed. You will be alone, and you will live in fear. This is a promise, Remus Lupin." His heart was hammering against his ribcage. He was giddy with terror, but he could still not move or speak or react. She dug her nails into his arm, and he could not cry out, but tears of pain welled in his eyes as beads of dark blood bubbled through his broken skin. "And you will come to us, crawling, defeated, and your father will welcome you with open arms and the love of the pack. You will never be lonely again." Crack! Someone apparated into the pub, catching Livia's attention. Remus couldn't turn his head to see, but she did, still gripping Remus's arm with all her strength. Her face turned sour and angry. "Argentum Creo!" a gruff voice shouted. Livia shrieked, letting go of Remus and covering her face as silver chains burst forth from the incantation, coiling themselves around her neck and arms. Groaning in pain, she hissed at Remus, "I will see you soon, brother," before apparating herself with a blistering crack. The silver chains fell to the sawdust-covered floor like a glistening snake, and Remus slumped forward, finally free. He turned away from his rescuer and threw up, his arm throbbing and the silver making his head swim. "Finite," the same gruff voice said, making the chains and vomit disappear in an instant. "Sorry about that, Remus." Leo Ferrex sat down in the seat opposite, where Livia had been only seconds before. Remus blinked at him through watering eyes and shook his head, wiping his mouth quickly. "It's okay," he croaked, feeling weak and shaken to the core. "Thanks." "Are you all right?" Ferrex asked, his blue eyes filled with parental concern. "I think so. It's just the silver," Remus nodded, clutching his arm and taking a quick swig of butterbeer to clear the bitter taste in his mouth. "Yeah," he nodded again. "Good." Ferrex's face turned stern. He reached across the table and slapped Remus around the back of the head. Remus yelped and ducked, more out of shock than pain. He stared at Ferrex, wounded. His old teacher glared back at him. "Then you can tell me what the bloody hell you think you're doing." She was... "I know exactly what she was. We've been tracking her for weeks." "We?" "Me and Moody," Ferrex said, impatiently, as if that was not the point. "Didn't I tell you how dangerous Greyback was? Was I not clear?" "You were clear," Remus scowled, "but I can make my own choices." "Obviously," Ferrex growled. The tall, white-bearded barman appeared at Ferrex's shoulder with a tumbler of fire whiskey. Ferrex accepted it and downed it in one. "Thanks, Aberforth," he nodded to the barman, who nodded and shuffled away again. Ferrex shook his head, still angry. "You're lucky he saw you. You're lucky he knew enough to contact Moody before he contacted anyone else." "Why? Who is he?" Remus turned to look. "It doesn't matter," Ferrex snapped, drawing Remus's attention back. "But you're damned lucky." Okay, Remus looked at his hands. His arm had stopped bleeding, but it was stinging very unpleasantly. Who knew what kind of muck she had under her nails? "I'm sorry." "It's not good enough, Remus," Ferrex sighed, deeply. "You were stupid and careless, and you could have been killed. Do you know what they want? Do you know why she was waiting for you?" "Yes," he replied, jawlessly, folding his arms, careful not to bump the one that hurt. "She told me." Ferrex laughed furiously. "They want to make you one of them." "I'm already one of them!" Remus shouted, standing up so fast his stool flew backwards, clattering onto the dirty pub floor and attracting everyone else's attention. Remus didn't care. He started for the door. Ferrex followed him outside. Remus walked faster, heading for Honeydukes. "You're not my dad, you're not even my teacher anymore, so piss off and leave me alone." His terror had turned to rage so quickly, his head still throbbing from the silver and from being slapped. "Just like bloody matron, bloody adults are all the bloody same." His arm hurting and itching more than ever, and Remus was not quick on his feet at the best of times. Ferrex caught up easily. He grabbed his shoulder. "Oi! Look, maybe I was a bit harsh, but Jesus Christ, Lupin, you gave us all such a fright." Remus stopped at that. "Or," Ferrex sighed again. "Come on, I'd better take you back to the castle. There's some people waiting for you." Before they began to walk back, Ferrex cast a Patronus, a huge long-legged bird, to send the message up to Hogwarts that they were both safe. "Dumbledore knows then," Remus sighed. "Afraid so. And McGonagall, I suppose. You're looking at a lot of detention, Remus. I won't lie to you." Remus snorted and looked up at Ferrex properly for the first time. Actually, he didn't have to look up. In the 2 years since they had last met, Remus had caught up in height. They were eye to eye. Ferrex was still gold-haired, ruggedly handsome and weather-beaten, but he was no longer the hero Remus had worshipped at 13. He was just a man, a soldier in war like all of them. "I'm really sorry," Remus said. "I knew it was stupid. I can't even explain myself." "Ah, you don't have to, lad." Ferrex clapped a hand to his shoulder. "It's only natural, knowing what you know about him." "I've never met another werewolf before," he said. "Are they all like that?" Ferrex glanced at him sideways. "What do you think?" Remus thought about this the while they walked, and eventually shook his head. "No, I suppose there can't be," he sighed. "There are good and bad people, good and bad wizards. Why should monsters be any different?" "Remus, me old pal, if you could get everyone else to understand that, then I don't think there would be a war on." He was brought straight to Dumbledore's office. Remus had never been inside it before, and it was almost as anxiety-inducing as meeting Livia. It was a high-ceilinged, airy room with portraits covering the walls and cabinets full of strange curiosities. Terrifyingly, Dumbledore was alone, sitting at his desk, writing on a long piece of parchment. Remus stood in silence for at least 5 minutes. "Mr. Lupin," the headmaster said, finally, "we always seem to meet under the most unpleasant conditions." "Yeah, fair enough," Remus nodded. He'd had too much of a night to care much about what Dumbledore had to say. "I said I'd fight for your bloody cause, old man. What more do you want?" Dumbledore watched his nonchalance carefully. "You've done a very dangerous thing tonight." "Yeah," he raised his bandaged arm. "You know that is not what I am referring to." "I know," Remus replied, hanging his head, trying to look remorseful. If he hadn't had the chance to cool off with Ferrex, then he might have a lot more to say. "I know, Professor, you aren't referring to any bodily harm I might have come to. That is clearly the least of your concerns, considering I had been tearing myself apart for 8 years before anyone decided to intervene." Dumbledore, of course, didn't know about the Marauder's secret. He may well have known about Madame Pomfrey's efforts to help Remus, but if he did, he showed no interest. So Remus shut up and took his punishment, hoping that eventually Dumbledore would release him and that he could just go back to bed. There was a lecture on responsibility and maturity, a stern reminder that the world was bigger than him and that his own personal motives did not matter. We all have to make sacrifices. Yeah, Remus scoffed inwardly. Some more than others, presumably. Do you understand, Remus? Yes, Headmaster. After that, he had to give Dumbledore a detailed account of everything he and Livia had discussed. It wasn't much. Remus couldn't help feeling a little bit disappointed by how little he had learned himself. Dumbledore seemed pleased, however, as much as Dumbledore ever seemed to be one thing or the other. Several of the clocks in one of the glass cabinets began to chime, and Remus realised that it was 3 o'clock in the morning. He stifled a yawn. Yes, Dumbledore nodded, as if Remus had just made a very interesting point. Perhaps that is enough for tonight. You may go to bed, Mr. Lupin. Remus nodded dozily and stood up, rubbing a zip which was stiff from sitting on the hard wooden seats all evening. Professor, he asked, just before leaving. Dumbledore had returned to his letter writing and made no sign he had heard the boy, so Remus just continued anyway. Livia said that I didn't know half the power I had, and she could do wondrous magic and wordless magic and... A talents were nothing out of the ordinary, Mr. Lupin, Dumbledore replied, not looking up. She has clearly studied the dark arts, and may be particularly gifted. Do not dwell on it. Okay, then, Remus replied, even more disappointed. Is Professor Ferrex still here? Mr. Ferrex is staying in Hogsmeade for a few more days. Good night, Remus. Good night, Headmaster. Professor McGonagall was waiting for him outside the office. She looked furious, but she didn't say anything. I'm sure you've had enough of a telling off for one night, she said, stiffly. Oh, Remus sighed. I could take a bit more, if it'll make you feel better. She raised an eyebrow at him, tottered, but kept walking. When they arrived at the portrait, she stopped and said, "You must attention every night except full moons, and tell those boys to get to bed at once." He crawled through the common room and found James, Sirius and Peter there, waiting in their pyjamas. James was pacing by the fireplace. Peter was trying not to fall asleep, leaning on his elbow, and Sirius, who had been sitting bolt upright in the armchair, leapt to his feet the moment he saw Remus. "What do you think you're playing at?" he shouted, striding across the room. "Running off on your own?" "Please don't, Padfoot, I'm knackered," Remus sighed, wincing. He was getting a headache. He just wanted to go to sleep. Enough talking tonight. "Do you have any idea what it was like finding out you'd sneaked off?" Sirius shouted. Remus raised an eyebrow at him. Sirius blinked and stepped back, slightly, looking down. "For all of us, I mean." "I can imagine," Remus said. "And I'm sorry, but please can I just go to bed? You can have a go at me in the morning." "Yeah, back off, Black." James came over and placed a hand on Sirius's shoulder. Sirius shrugged it off, agitated. James sighed, taking his glasses off. "It's late, we're all tired. You sure you're okay, Moony?" "Fine," Remus nodded. So grateful to James Potter.